My brother vanished when things got tough, but when he came back for a piece of my inheritance, he had no idea he was walking straight into a trap. There's a kind of person who disappears when life gets difficult, and then suddenly reappears the second something becomes valuable. I'd known my brother Marcus was that kind of person for most of my life. I just didn't know how prepared he was, or how long he'd been waiting. Marcus landed on a Thursday. I picked him up from the airport. That's what people do. Family is family. He walked out carrying one suitcase. No hug first. No questions. No how's Dad? His first sentence was, "We need to talk about the company." Not hello. Not how are you holding up. The company. I remember looking at him for a second, trying to tell myself I was reading too much into it. People say strange things under stress, so I ignored it. That was mistake number one. We drove straight to the rehab facility. Dad had been there 9 days. Second stroke. Speech affected. Movement slower. Mind completely intact. That part matters, because people hear stroke and assume confusion. Dad wasn't confused. Dad was watching. Marcus stayed in the room 25 minutes. I know because I checked later. 25. Then he stepped into the hallway and found the doctor. I heard pieces of the conversation. Recovery timeline. Cognitive prognosis. Expected return. Business capacity. That phrase stayed with me. On the drive back, Marcus looked out the window and asked, "So realistically, he's not coming back anytime soon?" I said, "Recovery could take a year." Marcus nodded once. Then said, "Okay. Just okay." Like somebody updating a spreadsheet. That night he stayed at my house. Next morning I woke up early. Coffee. Kitchen. Marcus was already sitting there. Laptop open. No breakfast. No emails. Company records. Financial reports. Asset inventory. I stopped in the doorway. He didn't even look guilty. He pointed at the screen. Said, "Equipment valuation alone is over 4 million. Then clicked. Development parcels. Another click. Contract pipeline. Another click. Like he'd done this before. I said, "Why are you looking at this?" He smiled. Small smile. No eyes. And said, "Just understanding what's at stake." At stake. Not what Dad built. Not what employees depended on. Not what our family carried. What was at stake? Like it already belonged to someone. Over the next week, Marcus started coming to the office. Not helping. Watching. Introducing himself. As Raymond Holt's son. As if nobody already knew who my father was. Employees started asking questions. My foreman Earl pulled me aside. 14 years working together. He said, "Danny, should I know something?" I asked what he meant. He said, "Your brother acts like something already changed." That sentence stayed with me. Because I realized something. Marcus wasn't arriving. Marcus was positioning. And people don't position unless they think something is coming. I still thought I had time. I still thought this was temporary. I was wrong. Because 3 days later, Marcus hired someone. A consultant from Atlanta. And that was the first moment I understood. My brother had not come home to help. He came home with a plan. And what I didn't know yet was that while I was keeping the company alive, Marcus had already visited our family attorney, already called our bank, and already started introducing himself to people as the future of Holt & Sons. And the worst part? Some people started believing him. Marcus never argued with me. That's what made him dangerous. People think manipulation looks dramatic. It doesn't. It looks polite, professional, reasonable. Marcus never tried to push me out. He tried something smarter. He tried to make everyone else decide I should move. And by the time I realized it, he was already in rooms I didn't know existed. Week 2. Marcus stopped acting like a visitor. He started acting like management. He showed up at the office every morning. 9 sharp. Coffee in hand. Button-down shirt. No work boots. No plans. No responsibilities. Just visibility. He walked around introducing himself as Raymond Holt's son. Asked people questions. Who handled purchasing? Who approved invoices? Who managed clients? Who controlled scheduling? Nobody thought much of it at first. Family business. People assumed he wanted to help. I assumed that too. For about 4 days. Then small things started happening. People stopped coming directly to me. Questions got delayed. Emails started including Marcus. Someone asked if approvals now needed both signatures. Both signatures. That was new. I asked where that came from. Nobody knew. Which meant somebody had planted the idea. Quietly. Then came Phil Garrett. Marcus introduced him casually. Dinner table. Tuesday night. Like he was mentioning a weather forecast. He said, I hired a consultant. I looked up. For what? Marcus shrugged. Transition planning. Transition. Interesting word. Not support. Not recovery. Transition. Like Dad had already left. Phil Garrett lived in Atlanta. Business consultant. Podcast. Leadership content. Corporate language. Marcus loved that kind of thing. Phil's whole philosophy was simple. When a founder becomes unavailable, leadership must be consolidated. Fast. Marcus repeated that line twice. Like he'd memorized it. I asked, what exactly is this guy helping with? Marcus leaned back, smiled, and said, nothing's changing, Danny. Pause. We're just creating clarity. That sentence bothered me. Because people only create clarity when they plan to change something. 3 days later, I got my first phone call. Claire. Project manager. One of our largest clients. She sounded confused. She said, hey Daniel, quick question. I said, yeah? She said, your brother emailed us. I sat up. She continued. He introduced himself as co-director. I said nothing. She asked, should communication go through him now? That moment. That exact moment. Something clicked. I said, no. Small pause. Then, nothing has changed. Claire said, okay. Then she added something I still remember. She said, I figured I should ask you first. That sentence did something to me. Because suddenly, I understood. Marcus wasn't testing me. He was testing whether people would follow him. I drove to the office. Opened the forwarded email. Read it once. Then again. Professional language. Transition planning. Continuity. Operational leadership. And there it was. One line. Buried in the middle. Co-director, Marcus Holt. Title created. Authority assumed. Nobody approved it. I closed my laptop. Picked up my keys. And drove somewhere I hadn't planned to go. Gerald Foss. Family attorney. 26 years. Knew everything. If Marcus was moving, Gerald already knew. At that point, I still thought I was early. I wasn't. Marcus had already been there. More than once. And what Gerald told me next changed the entire story. Because Marcus wasn't trying to join the company. He was trying to legally position himself to inherit control. And he had already asked one question. 3 separate times. One question that made my blood go cold. Can Dad still sign? Further in the video where I realized my brother wasn't improvising. He had a strategy. There's a difference between somebody trying to help and somebody preparing for ownership. You can feel it. One person asks, what needs to be done? The other asks, who signs? I found out which one Marcus was. The moment I sat down in Gerald Foss's office. Gerald had been our family attorney for 26 years. He handled my grandfather's estate. Every major contract. Every expansion. Every legal problem. If something happened in our family, Gerald knew. He looked up when I walked in. Didn't smile. Just said. Figured I'd be seeing you soon. Then closed the door. Not a great start. I sat down. Asked him directly. Why is Marcus here? Gerald looked at me for a second. Then said. Which visit? That sentence hit harder than I expected. Which visit? Not visit. Visits. Plural. Gerald opened a folder. Slowly. Like somebody opening medical results. He said. Marcus wanted to understand ownership. I said. What ownership? Gerald ignored the question. Continued. He asked whether being the eldest son gave him authority. I already didn't like where this was going. Gerald said. I told him no. Pause. Holt & Sons is an LLC. Your father is sole managing member. No automatic succession. I nodded. Good. End of story. Then Gerald said. He had another question. I asked. What question? Gerald folded his hands. Looked straight at me. And said. Can Raymond still legally sign documents? I didn't answer. Gerald continued. He asked 3 times. Not once. 3. Different ways. Same question. Could Dad sign? Could changes be authorized? Could authority be transferred? Could business decisions still be executed? Not. How is recovery? Not. What does Raymond want? Can he sign? I felt something cold settle into my stomach. Because suddenly, everything started connecting. Hospital visits. Doctor questions. Consultant. Emails. Office appearances. He wasn't helping. He was building legitimacy. I asked. Can Dad sign? Gerald nodded. Yes. Then paused. But that's not the important question. I looked at him. He leaned forward and said, people recovering from something serious become vulnerable. They trust proximity. Whoever sits in the room the longest starts sounding reasonable. That sentence stayed with me. Because Marcus had been in that room every day. And I hadn't. I was working. Running payroll. Keeping contracts alive. Doing all the things Dad spent 20 years teaching me to do. And Marcus was becoming visible. I drove straight to the rehab facility. No warning. No call. Dad was finishing therapy. I waited in his room. When they brought him back, he looked tired. But his eyes were sharp. Still Dad. I sat down. And for the first time, I told him everything. The consultant. The emails. The attorney. The title. The question. Can Dad still sign? I said all of it. Slow. No emotion. Just facts. Dad listened. Never interrupted. When I finished, he looked at me. Long silence. Then he said 3 words. Slowly. Clearly. Words that changed everything. I know, son. I stared at him. He looked toward the window. Then back at me. Reached over. Put his hand on my arm. And said. Gerald. Pause. Tuesday. Pause. Both of you. That was all. I drove home. Didn't call Marcus. Didn't confront him. Didn't ask questions. I just waited. Because something in Dad's face told me. He wasn't surprised. Which meant something worse. He had expected this. And whatever Tuesday was, it had already started. That night, Marcus made his biggest mistake. He stopped trying to influence Dad. And started trying to lead the company. He emailed my staff. Introduced a new management structure. And put himself above me. What happened the next morning told me something terrifying. Marcus actually believed he had already won. People imagine revenge looks dramatic. Raised voices. Doors slamming. Public humiliation. Most of the time, it looks quiet. One person speaks. Everyone else realizes they misunderstood the entire situation. That's what Tuesday looked like. Not war. Correction. Tuesday. 8 in the morning. Gerald Foss's office. Small room. Old carpet. Coffee smell. 7 chairs. 6 occupied. Me. Marcus. Gerald. His paralegal. Dad's physician. And Raymond Holt. My father. Already seated. Already waiting. Dad was wearing a button-down shirt. Dark slacks. Hair combed. Back straight. Not hospital clothes. Not recovery clothes. Business clothes. He looked tired. But not weak. Marcus walked in. Stopped. His face changed for half a second. Then recovered. Smile. Movement. He stepped forward. Dad. Moved in for a hug. Dad lifted one hand. Small motion. Stop. Marcus stopped. Sat down. Then Phil Garrett walked in. Marcus had invited him. Consultant. Transition expert. Podcast voice. He started introducing himself. Dad looked at him once. Then said, "Not invited." Silence. Gerald stood. Opened the door. Phil looked around. Nobody moved. He left. Door closed. That was the first crack. Gerald opened his briefcase. Pulled out 2 folders. Looked at everyone. Then said, "Raymond asked me to clarify several matters." He lifted the first document. A written statement. Dad looked straight ahead. Gerald read. Slowly. Every word. The statement said, Marcus held no position. No authority. No operational role. Client outreach. Unauthorized. Consultant. Unauthorized. Staff communication. Unauthorized. Any representation of leadership? Made without Raymond Holt's consent. The room got quieter with every sentence. Marcus leaned forward. Said, "Dad, I was trying to help." Dad looked at him. No anger. No emotion. Just one sentence. Let him finish. Marcus leaned back. Gerald picked up the second folder. Different tone. Different paper. He said, "This document has been on file for 8 years." I looked at him. Marcus looked at him. Nobody moved. He opened it. Business succession agreement. Filed. Witnessed. Signed. Notarized. 8 years ago. Before strokes. Before hospitals. Before consultants. Before Marcus came home. Gerald continued. In the event of death. Pause. Retirement. Pause. Or medical incapacitation. Pause. Daniel Holt becomes sole managing member of Holt & Sons Development. Automatic transfer. Immediate. No vote. No review. No discussion. The physician placed 1 page on the table. Certification. Trigger condition met. Already active. Gerald closed the folder. Looked at me. Then said, "As of this morning." Pause. The company has already transferred. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Marcus stared. Then said quietly, 8 years ago? Gerald nodded. Your father created this independently. Marcus turned toward me. His face changed. Not anger. Confusion. Like a man reading the wrong map. Then he stood. Chair hit the wall. He said, "I'm the firstborn." Pause. I came back. Pause. I gave up 5 weeks. Dad interrupted. Voice rough. But clear. Clearer than I had heard in months. He said, "You gave up nothing." Silence. Then, slowly, carefully, Dad said, "You came for the asset valuation. I heard you. The first night." Marcus opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Dad turned toward me. Looked at me. And said 2 words. Quiet. Simple. Final. I see you. 22 years. I never asked. He never said. Until then. Marcus sat back down. But something had changed. Not because he lost. Because for the first time, he realized nobody had taken anything from him. There had never been anything for him to take. But Marcus still wasn't done. He walked out of Gerald's office, straight into the parking lot, and started making calls. To clients nobody answered. The worst losses don't happen in public. Nobody claps. Nobody celebrates. There's no speech. Just a person slowly realizing the position they thought they had never actually existed. That's what happened to Marcus. Not in the meeting. After. When he walked into the parking lot and discovered nobody was waiting for him. Marcus left Gerald's office without another word. No argument. No dramatic exit. Just stood up, opened the door, and walked out. The room stayed quiet. Dad looked tired. Gerald closed the folders. Nobody moved. Then, through the window, I saw Marcus standing beside his car. Phone in his hand. Calling somebody. I didn't think much of it at first. Then my phone buzzed. Earl. One message. 4 words. Your brother called. I stared at it. Then another. Claire. Everything okay over there? Then Roy. County Roads Office. 1 sentence. We're staying with you. That was when I understood. Marcus wasn't leaving. He was trying to recover. Later that afternoon, Marcus called me. I answered. Long silence. Then, he said, nobody is returning my calls. I didn't say anything. He continued. I called Earl. Pause. Nothing. I called Sutherland. Pause. Nothing. I called the county office. Long silence. Then, quietly, he said, what did you do? I looked out my office window. Equipment yard. Crew moving. Same Tuesday. Same company. Nothing changed. Then I answered. I said. Nothing. Silence. Then. Dad did. Long pause. Then Marcus laughed. Not because something was funny. Because something finally made sense. He said. You knew. I said. I found out Tuesday. More silence. Then. His voice changed. Smaller. He asked. Then why won't anyone follow me? I thought about answering. Thought about 22 years. Early mornings. Rain. Bad projects. Missed weekends. Keeping promises. Showing up. Then I said. Because they already chose. Silence. Marcus didn't speak. Then finally. He asked something I never expected. He said. What am I supposed to do now? That question stayed with me. Because for the first time, he didn't sound angry. He sounded lost. Like someone who had confused access with belonging. I said. Go home. He hung up. He left Knoxville the next morning. Visited Dad once before leaving. I don't know what they talked about. Dad never told me. I never asked. Some conversations belong to the people in them. 3 months passed. Nothing dramatic happened. Which, honestly, was the point. The county contract renewed. Sutherland signed Phase 2. The staff stayed. Nobody quit. Nobody switched sides. Because there were never sides. There was just reality. And reality had been there long before Marcus arrived. Dad comes into the office once a week now. Coffee. Corner chair. No meetings. No speeches. He watches. Sometimes says one sentence. Usually the right sentence. Last month. He looked around the office. Then looked at me. And said. Quiet now. I nodded. He smiled. Small. Then said. Good. Marcus called in March. Asked if there was room for a consulting role. Something advisory. A way to stay connected. I told him I'd think about it. I haven't decided. Not because I'm angry. Not because I want revenge. Some things just shouldn't be handed to people. Even people you love. And here's the part one still think about. Marcus spent 5 weeks trying to inherit a company. Dad spent 8 years making sure he couldn't. But Marcus didn't lose the company. That was never his. He lost something harder to get back. The chance to become the kind of person people would have followed anyway. That's the strange thing about people who calculate value. They think ownership creates respect. But sometimes, respect already decided ownership. Long before the paperwork. Long before the meeting. Long before Tuesday. And sometimes, the game ended years before one player